Praise the Lord. God is good, and all the time. I would love to appreciate my brother, Mr. Martin Chizito, who has introduced me, and also to appreciate the Department of Public Administration and Governance for inviting me to speak to you and share with you on this annual Anti-Corruption Week on this very date. And I want to say thank you once again to the organizers, because when you invited me, I came very, very early. This is my home. I was here way back in '88, and the Canon Nelson Yakasamba was my chaplain, and we appreciate the work you did for us. If I could command these people to clap for you, I would have told them, but thank you very much. So I want to thank those organizers for giving me the opportunity to come back and share with these elites. Time is not so much on our side, certainly. And I was given that topic, which has already been given to you: the cost of a corrupt lifestyle to a Christian. Lessons from the Bible. Lessons from the Bible. This topic sounds so simple, but the content is so tough. When we talk about corruption, and if I was to ask among us who is corrupt, you could not see any hand up. And I want to appreciate again the people who came up with this idea. Because certainly, when you talk about corruption in Africa, and in Uganda in particular, one may think that you are fighting a losing battle. It reminded me of a teacher who was holding an English class and was teaching about tenses, and was asked the students to leave phrase, or I was asking them the tenses, or the tense in which he was putting some of the sentences. And he came up with one sentence. This was the sentence: one day, Uganda will be corruption-free. Hopefully, this is a very wonderful statement. And then the teacher asked the students, which tense is that? And one younger man hurriedly put up his hand and said, teacher, teacher. And the teacher said, okay, give us the tense. And the younger boy said, it is a future impossible tense. So I want to appreciate the Department of Public Administration and Governance, that though when you talk about corruption, you say, now, where do we begin? Where do we start? Because it's all around us, but nobody admits it. From the biblical point of view, corruption is a very wide thing. And why am I saying that sometimes one may think it is fighting a losing battle? But of course you can lose a battle, but you can win a war. That is giving hope. Because as I said, you ask who is going to fight it. These days, there are so many seminars about parenting. When I was growing, I don't remember my father attending one. But somehow, we grew up. But these days there are so many parenting seminars because those ones who are parents need also to be parented. Recently I was in one of the big schools on visitation, very respected schools in Uganda. And what was so disappointing was to see a parent who was drunk, and this was a woman, and she appeared very ugly. She was drunk. I don't know how she came in, and she had come to visit a child, drunk, vividly drunk. And I've known some schools where they give wrappers to parents because when they come into school, they are almost dressed naked. So they say, members, don't tempt our children because this is a mixed school. At least get a wrapper. So then you can enter. But some schools which are tough, they say, go back. So the parents also need to be parented of these days. The people who would be teaching morals are sometimes the most immoral. In the days past, teachers were known to be morally upright. These days, you hardly entrust your child with a teacher, hardly. Even sometimes with a pastor. I want members, because of time, to define, from the biblical point of view, the word corruption. The word corruption, from a biblical point of view, means moral degradation, moral ruin. It is a state of decay and hopelessness. There are so many definitions you can come up with. And you can look for that definition from the book of Job, chapter 17, verse 14, the book of Genesis, chapter 6, verse 11, Exodus, chapter 32, verse 7, Hosea, chapter 9, verse 9, and Galatians, chapter 6, verse 8. In Jeremiah, chapter 17, verse 9, the Hebrew word meaning corruption is translated as deceitful and polluted. It means self-serving conduct and attitude. Therefore, it means selfishness and self-centeredness. Corruption is a monster that destroys whatever it feeds on. It renders the individual and the society incapacitated. Corruption destroys the social, political, and religious systems. According to the Bible, brethren, corruption is the violation of divine order and God's covenant, hence attracting divine judgment. In your free time, I humbly request you to look at Genesis chapter 3, verse 1. Adam had made a covenant with God, which was broken in Genesis chapter 3, and it brought judgment. Corruption, brethren, is sin in capital letters. Corruption is sin, S-I-N. And of course, for those people who define sin in many ways, when you talk about sin, it is selfishness, it is pride, hubris, sin. And we know very well from the book of Romans, chapter 6, verse 23, that the wages of sin is death. We are looking at the cost of a corrupt lifestyle to a Christian. Lessons from the Bible. The wages of sin is death. Those are not my words. God's case, no appeal. In the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 16 to 19, God cursed Adam and Eve for choosing a corrupt lifestyle. I won't go into the details of the curses and the whatever. It's a common book. In verse 17 of the same book, same chapter, God said, because you, and that is Adam, have heeded the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. Cursed is the ground, cost of a corrupt lifestyle. And you know what happens. The ground which was supposed to produce good things and whatever started producing grass, which is funny. Corruption, brethren, as a lifestyle, deprives justice. A society characterized by corruption misses out on justice. Misses out on justice. When Israel was characterized by corruption, God sent Prophet Amos, who called upon the Israelites to, I quote, let justice run down like water. And it continues. That is in Amos chapter 5, verse 24. There was no justice in Israel. And if you read that book up to the end, later Israel had to face inevitable destruction. In Amos chapter 2, verse 6 to 8, the prophet describes 3 major sins. I mentioned them: covetousness, indifferences, and oppression of the poor. As Israel's destruction came nearer, conditions worsened drastically. The courts of law were totally corrupt, with judges in collusion with lawyers selling their verdicts to the highest bidder. The best thing to do by then was to settle a case out of court, if possible. Why? Because the people who would be upholding justice were corrupt. Actually, they are inflicting injustice. I'm speaking to people who are learned. You can always relate. While corruption ran rampant in Israel, people were worshiping God in droves, in groups. They're worshiping. And I want to appreciate the chaplains, for that matter, for this kind of fellowship. I think twice a week, at least 1 hour fellowship. And I know maybe at least 2 or 3 souls attached, and that can make a difference. And of course, that is what sets us different from other universities, and they make us a center of excellency in the heart of Africa. So it's my humble prayer that our worship here is not turned into entertainment, but is serious worship and meaningful. So these people came and worshiped. The Israelites were worshiping. A high percentage of the people attended services and observed the Jewish religious festivals. But in spite of their religious worship, God said this: I hate. Who is speaking? God. I hate, I despise your feast days, and I do not respect your sacred assemblies. Take away from me the noise of your songs, for I will not hear the melody of your stringed instruments. That is in what God said, and it is in in the book of Amos. Therefore, the corrupt lifestyle of the Israelites had made God reject their worship and sacrifices. What does that mean? Communication between the Israelites and God had totally broken down. That's the cost of choosing a corrupt lifestyle. And the good thing, I will not labor so much, because you see, people go into sin well knowing the repercussions. They know what is going to come out. But somehow, as they always give powers to the devil, that the devil tempted, lures them to do the best, to do the evil. So somebody goes into fornication, well knowing that if it's not HIV conceiving HIV, then you conceive a baby. Or you conceive both. They know it. But they say, but this pressure cannot be ignored for the 2 hours or minute. Not even 2 hours. How long does it take? You know very well. But you say, I don't mind. I would rather sacrifice my life for that pressure, for those few minutes. So people go into a corrupt lifestyle well knowing the cost. But they say, don't mind. After all, men are doing it. We rationalize corruption. In Amos chapter 3, verse 9 to 10, the prophet is told to proclaim the oppression, violence, and robbery in the nation. When you talk about violence, it's a characteristic of corruption. Today, violence is obviously seen everywhere. It is glaring. Arua, recently there was one man, is it Kaoya, was tortured just in broad daylight. And people were just looking on, and they're saying, Bamukubye, you know, just like that. So violence is everywhere. Robbery is everywhere. You move in town with a good phone, somebody will take it and say to Ongoba, don't come after me. And then if you have a friend around, you say, he has taken it, he has taken my phone. Who? That one. You can even tell the police, and the police will say, you live with them. Yeah. Watch out. So violence is everywhere. This is the cost of corruption. The Israelites did not realize, as Amos was proclaiming this oppression and violence in society and robbery, they didn't realize that this cancerous immorality plaguing the country from within would result in Israel being crushed and destroyed from without. And in verse 10, a corrupt lifestyle had made Israel unable to tell the difference between good and evil. However, and of course, when corruption sets in, somebody will say, this is black. I say, my friend, this is white. Say, you have a problem with your eyes. It's black. However, even when time came to defend Israel from foreign invasion, Israel would have no strength, as you read in Amos chapter 3, verse 11. Hence, the cost of a corrupt lifestyle deprives one of strength and the ability for self-defense. One becomes defenseless. Therefore, an individual and all society becomes weak in the face of the enemy. One becomes vulnerable to destruction. A corrupt lifestyle of a Christian or a man makes God to grieve in the heart. God is made to regret his action of creating man. You can read Genesis chapter 6, verse 6. And in the next chapter, chapter 7, God sent floods to destroy the earth. Cost. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2 says, when the righteous increase, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people groan. When the wicked are in power, it is often a judgment of God. just like he did with ancient Israel. You remember the reign of Ahab and Jezebel. You remember Nebuchadnezzar, Rehoboam and Jeroboam, to mention but a few. It is like the nation gets leadership they deserve. It is God who removes kings and sets up kings. You can see that in Daniel chapter 2, verse 21. When a nation exalts God, God will exalt that nation. You can look at Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 1. Morality and righteousness make a nation strong, but immorality and corruption and unrighteousness will always bring a nation down into ruin. Where there is corruption, brethren, government, business, and community become ineffective. There's what you call, in medical language, multi-organ failure. All systems break down. Today, you may find so many loopholes in the tax laws. Emisoro. But unfortunately, the leaders who set up these rules or these laws to tax the people try as much as they can to pay the taxes themselves, including some of our parliamentarians. But they want the poor to pay. Why? Because the moment they get in parliament, they want a new car of about 300 millions, and it is the poor to pay. So you must pay. But they should not. Corruption. What else? They want to be facilitated with the fuel, 5 millions every month. Fuel. Where do they go? I don't know. On top of that, they have to push you to pay because they need their medical allowance. And when they are beaten, they can easily fly to India to receive, or India or wherever, to receive medical attention. Whereas for us, when you go to Mulago or Chiruddu, they can tell you, you just make your will. And when they die, they need that allowance, a funeral allowance of about 68 millions. So they have to force you to pay, though they don't want to pay themselves. And of course, on top of that, they get a huge salary, monthly salary of not less than 20 millions. The New Testament portrays corruption as something that affects every aspect of the personality. Corruption is expressed in the mind and conscience, and also in character. Actually, you can see somebody's character. You can look at someone. There's some people you can look at, politicians, and you see corruption just on the face. They don't need to hide it. The most heinous example of corruption in the Bible is the 30 pieces of silver that Judas Iscariot received to betray Jesus. A direct result of Judas's action was that Jesus was arrested and he tried at night, very unjustly. Courts are not supposed to sit at night. But he was tried at night and unjustly, and later he was condemned to die. Eventually, Judas realized that his acceptance of a bribe was evil. But when he tried to return the money to the chief priests and elders, they refused it, calling it, and what it was exactly, blood money. Consequently, Judas destroyed himself when he committed suicide. What does that mean? Choosing a corrupt lifestyle is choosing suicide. When man decides to love the world and makes friendship with, he loses friendship with God. As James chapter 4, verse 4 says, that friendship with the world is enmity with God. That is too expensive for man to cause enmity between him and God. The adversaries, that is in Amos chapter 2, verse 10, says, the adversaries of God will be broken in pieces. Therefore, it is important, as I wind up, to note that wherever or wherever corruption thrives, Where there is corruption, growth and development of the individual and society will be hindered. As observed from the Bible, corruption compromises national security. Wars crop up due to unfair distribution of the national cake. I remember when Idi Amin took over in 1971, April 25th, I was alive and I was watching what was taking place. And we celebrated the beginning at around 5. We started celebrating in the streets. And Amin said the reason he overthrew Obote was because he was corrupt and was tribalistic. And of course, you remember when I don't want to go into the history. So, and he was not distributing the national cake fairly, for that matter. Amin came in. And his 8 years rule or reign, we also saw another tribe coming up. I think the Nubians in Bombo there, the whatever, they are really enjoying when he started distributing the shops, which were formerly for Indians. Again, the tribalistic kind of, element was so much at the center. And so he was favoring his tribesmen. And that means that, again, the national cake was not fairly distributed. So he was overthrown, corruption. And we got the Tanzanians. They came in, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, thank you very much, rest in peace. And the Tanzanians took most of our properties, wrist watches, radio cassettes, and also women. And they left. Then we got Obote 2. And they said, Obote 2, you're favoring again a certain tribe. So you are tribalistic. I think they eat so by then, and the people from where, Obote, go. So Obote went. And then we got this wonderful government of Mr. Museveni. And when he goes, we shall know who are being favored and eating the biggest cake. So, corruption makes people lose trust in their leaders, and it leads to unstable governments. The government's instability could lead to over-expenditures on defense and procurement of military hardware in order for the government to perpetuate itself amidst opposition. These days, I don't want to say it, how much, I don't know how much is spent on tear gas and bullets and whatever. This leads to compromising the values of democracy. From this argument, one can see that if corruption is not checked, it could lead to more corruption. Hence, a deeply rotten society. Political instability, corruption, and underdevelopment are mutually reinforcing, resulting in a life-stressing, vicious circle. So corruption reinforces underdevelopment. Underdevelopment reinforces corruption. Political instability reinforces corruption. And corruption reinforces political instability. So they are brothers or sisters. What is the solution, my friends? The solution to the above is repent and turn back to God. Amos says in chapter 5, verse 6, seek the Lord and live. May God bless you.